A couple of years ago, I got myself in a bad situation. So I quit my job and I don't regret doing that. But I was burnt out. I was working a lot of hours. It was just too much being a single mom, trying to, clean and cook and, just do all the things, make sure I'm spending time with my kids, being there for them and all of that stuff. I just could not deal with all of that, right? And how demanding this position was. And so I quit my job. I did, so the thing is, I thought I had planned this out, which I would say that I probably did, but I just didn't manage the planning very well. So I made sure I had a little buffer, to work with to help me get through the following months while I figure out my plan. So the plan was I would start my business, I would get that going and I would be able to buy myself some time. But as I started to go throughout this journey, obviously there are unexpected things that you're not aware of that will potentially happen. I ended up totaling my car. I hit a deer, totaled my car. I was about maybe 4 payments away from paying off this car, and I was banking on that. I was like, okay, I should only have a few more payments on this car. So once I pay my car off, I'm good. And so all I have to do is just focus on all the other bills. But then I totaled that car. So then I had to get another car. Now I'm back to making payments, and my payments were higher. And there were quite a few other things that happened during that particular time. And so I ended up running out of money. Okay. So I found myself taking on debt, something that I hadn't done before. The only debt that I had was from some student loans. And that was it. I think that was it. All I had was some student loans because I did have a credit card that had a very small limit on it. I think it was my first credit card with Capital One. It was like a $300 credit card, a $300 limit. But anytime I would charge anything on that card, I would pay it off. So the student loans was the only kind of debt that I had. But during that time, just to kind of keep myself going, I was taking on debt, taking out loans, honey. I was just, doing whatever I needed to do to pay those bills. So got myself into some debt, right? It happened real fast. And I remember just thinking, because the business was not, popping. Nothing was really going on. I was focused on all the aesthetics and trying to get all the groundswork of it together and all this stuff. And it was just a lot that I learned. But, to say the least, I learned a lot from that situation. But it didn't take away the fact that I got myself into some debt in order so I could pay my bills. But I remember just being in a position where I wanted to control everything. I wanted to be in control of the whole process. And, when I realized, okay, I got to go back to work, I got to get a job, I was in the process of doing that, but I was also still stressed out about my bills while I was also still trying to figure out the business stuff, while I was still a mother trying to take care of my kids. It was just so much that was going on at the time. And I was just so overwhelmed, but I was still trying to control everything. And one of the things that I remember trying to be in control of was my credit. And I remember, just thinking, because I had worked so hard to get my credit to where it was. I had, recently purchased my home, and, my credit was looking good. It was on up and up. And again, my credit was almost flawless. And so, I was working on trying to work on like those student loans and whatever else that I had that was still lingering. But for the most part, that was everything else was looking pretty good. But I was trying to hold on to this credit. But once I was having a hard time paying these loans back, I started having late payments hitting my credit, and late payments from other bills that was hitting my credit because I'm having to rob Peter to pay Paul. And I remember I was just so stressed out, and I was just like, oh my goodness, like I worked so hard on my credit, but I'm trying so hard to try to get it together. And I was just missing the whole point. And, time went on, I eventually ended up, getting a job, more stable, regular, long-term job until I could, figure other things out. But I remember it was as I was, working on just trying to get things together slowly but surely, I realized that I have no control over everything. I was worrying myself to death about something that I could not control at that moment. And that was the moment that I realized that I don't have control over everything, and I can't control everything. I can only control what I can't control. I can only control what's within my disposal, and everything else I had to let go and let God. And that was one of the hardest things for me to do because as a woman who has been, you know, independent, I realized at that point where I just kind of like hit rock bottom that I was just like, I have to give everything to God. I gotta let this go. And it was so hard for me to let go, but I had no choice. I had no choice because I started to realize when I talk about my faith and I talk about my relationship with God, I started to really realize that I really wasn't trusting God the way that I thought I was doing, or the way that I wanted to be able to trust them. I really wasn't doing that because if I thought that I was in control of everything, I'm putting myself in God's seat. Now at that point, if I want to take care of everything on my own and I want to do everything by myself and how I want to do it, then how can God really use me? I had to be able to let go and let God. And that's when we're talking about faith and we're talking about trust, that really put me in a vulnerable position. And it was scary. And, it was a place that I had never been in. It was foreign to me because I always felt like everything was in my control, right? I could just go get my job or pay my bills. I felt like I was doing everything, right? I worked hard for everything that I got, all of the things that we tell ourselves. But that moment made me realize that I was not in control of everything that I thought I was in control of, and life hit me hard. I had to take my foot off the gas. I had to say, you know what? I just give it to you, Lord. I couldn't do it no more. All the worrying and the stressing out and the overwhelm and all of the things I was putting myself through was because that I wanted to be in the driver's seat. I wanted to put myself in God's position of feeling like I am in control of everything in my life. And that's not the case. Now, although I can look back and say, well, I should have quit my job and I should have, had another job in place or something, or I should, I should have, could have, would have, right? I can say all of the things. But I don't regret the decision. I think that it taught me a valuable lesson. And I think it's the reason why maybe things didn't quite work out from the business standpoint like I wanted it to. And I think that me going through the things that I went through during that time was meant for me to go through those things, that God wanted to show me something during that time, that no matter what it is that I'm doing, and even as I was able to revisit the whole, business stuff and just kind of starting over and taking things slow in the process, that God wanted me to understand that he should be involved in this process. That even while I'm building this business, that I shouldn't be thinking that I'm in control of everything, that I should involve him in this process and I should allow him to, guide my footsteps through this process so that, this, it is something that not only lasts for the now, but it lasts for the future. Because another thing that I've always set out to do in the vision that I had was to leave a legacy, to build generational wealth, and for it to be a kingdom built business, right? To make kingdom impact. And in order for me to do that, God has to be involved in this process. So if you are a person right now, you're a woman, no matter where you are in your life, and you think that you have control over everything, or you want to be able to control all aspects, but you also see that you're stressed out a lot, you're feeling like maybe you're depressed, you don't know what's going on, it's a lot of anxiety, you're worrying a lot. You might be putting yourself in a position where you're trying to control everything in your life, and you're not allowing God to control or take care of the things that you can't take care of. Because if you're having to worry about something, that means you should be giving that to God. Because otherwise, if you can take action on something, that means you should either be taking action or whatever that is not within your control, you should be giving that to God. And so I encourage you to evaluate your life, evaluate the things that you feel like you are worrying about a lot, you're stressed out a lot about. And like I said, there could be a couple things going on that maybe there's action that you should be taking and you're not. Or if you felt like you've done all that you can do, then you should be giving the rest to God. And so as you go throughout this week, write some of those things out, maybe even cross the stuff out, ball it up, throw it in the trash, throw it in the fire, do something, and just tell yourself, I give that to you, Lord. Make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.